Hello again. Hi, everyone. Lar from Complete Test Success here. Today's live stream, we're just doing a Q&A. So that basically means you bring whatever questions you have to me. It could be questions about the test, questions about how to improve. You might have some problems that you don't know how to overcome. Whatever that might be, just let me know in the comments and I'll be able to give you some advice on how to overcome your problems or give you direct answers on those questions that you guys have. We have a few comments here already. Little Wolf, hi to you. Hi, Zara. Welcome to the lesson again. Hi, Lewis. Long time no see. I'm good. Thank you. Hope you're doing good too. Raul, hello to you. Welcome to the lesson. Okay, so another Lewis. Hi, Lewis. Welcome. Muqtadir, hi to you. Hi, Mohammed. Welcome. And Tanya, hello to you. I love my speaking. I have my speaking exam tomorrow. I need advice for vocab part. Okay, so when you're in the speaking test, you can't pretend that your vocab is better than it is. You can't start using vocab that you don't normally use. If you try to use vocab that you wouldn't normally use, that's going to reduce your fluency score. If you try to use vocab that you don't normally use, you're going to make more vocab mistakes, and very likely what you're trying to say will become unclear. That will reduce your vocab score and your fluency and coherence score. So what you want to do is focus on the question. Make sure you understand the question. If you don't understand the question, ask the examiner, to explain the phrase or to repeat the question. Make sure you understand it. And all of your attention should go on clear communication. Just answering the question directly, developing your answer, and not worrying about what vocab you use to communicate. Whatever vocab comes to you naturally, whatever vocab you would normally use, whatever comes to mind, without effort, that's the vocab you should use. So just use the vocab that comes to you naturally. Don't try to do anything different. Just, use the vocab that comes to you. Focus more on clearly communicating the ideas that you want to communicate. So that's the best thing to do. You're not going to get a higher score by pretending your vocab is better than it is. You're going to have the opposite. It's going to have the opposite effect. So that's what you want to do. Just focus more on understanding the question, deciding what you are going to say, and then trying to communicate that as clearly as possible. Ken Clark, hi to you. Welcome. Hey, XIX, good to see you here. You too, Mohammed. Lewis, in the writing section, how do I know if an idea is relevant and specific to the question? Well, the only reason that you might not know if an idea is relevant would be, well, not the only reason, but like the only reason that you don't really have control over is if you don't understand the question. Basically, it's not relevant means you're not answering the question. So if I say to you, what's your name? And you say, I'm fine, thank you. I was like, well, why didn't you answer that question? Like, I asked you what your name is. You said, fine, thank you. So did you not understand the question? Right? If you didn't understand the question, well, then your language ability is stopping you from coming up with relevant ideas because you don't understand the question. How can you answer it? So that's the first problem. Maybe your language ability is too low. It's stopping you from understanding the question. After that, it's about paying attention to every word in the question. So like if the question is saying, more and more people are complaining that they don't have free time. Why is this happening? And if you say, well, when people work too much, they don't have enough free time. It's like, yeah, that's correct. If people work too much, they don't have free time. But the question isn't why do some people not have free time? It's more and more people say they have less free time. So what we're now explaining is the difference between the past and the present. So why did people in the past feel like they had more free time than people do now? So what you need to be aware of is like that word, more and more people. It's not just why do people feel they have less free time, it's why do more people. So sometimes the problem then, if your ideas are irrelevant, it's because you've ignored some of the words in the question. And that's very often the next problem. If you do understand the question, is maybe you're ignoring some aspect of the question. what I train my students to do is like, think of your idea first and write them down. You have to plan your essays, because if you don't plan your essays, you might end up with 4 ideas in your head. You're trying to remember 4 ideas and decide how to develop 4 ideas. And then you're trying to check if each idea is relevant. But, you know, trying to do all that in your head is really challenging. Whereas if you write down your 4 ideas and you just look at the very first one, and you go against every word in the question, it's like, am I talking about people? Yes. Am I talking about more people? Oh, no, I'm not. I'm actually not talking about more people. Get rid of that idea, find a new one. But not just that one word more, but every word in the question. So like, am I really talking about what the question has asked me to talk about? Going through every word of the question, referring back one idea at a time to the question and making sure it's relevant, making sure you haven't, you know, disregarded or ignored any of the words in the question. That will generally get you where you need to go. But you need to be very critical. Don't just assume like, you know, you want to be right, so it's right. You need to be very critical of yourself and analyze yourself in that way. With the second part of your question, so that's how to know if your idea is relevant. The second thing you said is, how do you know if your idea is specific? So the first one is if you refer to several ideas together. So you would say something like, you know, there are many reasons for this. So many reasons, well, that's vague. Don't talk about many reasons, talk about one. So take one of those ideas that you're thinking of and talk about that rather than many ideas. And then there are some just very common words that people use, like convenient. You know, an idea like convenient. Well, that's always going to be vague, because convenient might mean, you know, saving time, saving money, saving energy, you know, like something like that. It could be all of those things. So if you use the word like more convenient, more beneficial, those imply there are some good things, but it's not saying specifically which good thing you want to talk about. So generally, if an idea isn't specific, it's a word or an idea that, or a phrase that covers multiple ideas at once, and that would be the idea. That would be when an idea is not specific. That's when an idea is vague. So just look out for those few things. Are you using convenient as a main idea? Well, that's going to be a problem. So that's mainly how to do that. But the thing is, like, even when you understand what that means, you know, like when students join my course, I teach this to them, and then they write an essay. And in their first essay, they hand me an essay with, you know, one vague idea and one irrelevant idea. So even though they understand the concept, it's still difficult to avoid that mistake. So then when I'm giving them feedback, I'm like, look, what you're after doing, that idea is irrelevant. It's irrelevant because you ignored this word in the question. And then they're like, you know, of course, they're kind of kicking themselves. It's like, how did I not notice? Oh, that's so obvious. But once you make that mistake a few times and you're getting that feedback, you kind of learn from that mistake better. So, you know, the concept of what you need to do, understanding that and actually doing it correctly are not necessarily the same thing, which is why, you know, getting feedback from a teacher is such an important part of improving your scores. Because yes, you know what to do, but are you doing it correctly? Those aren't necessarily the same thing. But that's kind of the basics of how to make sure your ideas are okay. And once your ideas are okay, now the doors are open to band 6, 7, 8, 9. But it's very important to get that right. The task response score in task 2, that's essential that you can do that. Mohammed, can I join your live virtual conversation? I have some questions. Yep. So what we're doing today, Mohammed, is you just write your questions in the comments and I will answer those for you. So yeah, absolutely. Just type your questions in the comments there when you're ready. Rahul, for part 2 cue card, if I don't get the question, can I ask the examiner to explain it? Yeah. So in part 2, you could ask the examiner to explain a phrase. You couldn't ask the examiner to explain the question. But, you know, if it said, like, I don't know, describe a book you've read recently, and you don't know what the word recently means, you can ask the examiner. So you could say, like, what does recently mean? Or it could be a phrase. You could say, what does, you know, read recently mean? You know, so you can ask the examiner to explain a word or a phrase in the task 2 cue card. Yeah, but you cannot just say explain the question. They won't do that for you. Hi, Versailles. Good to see you here again. Tanya, sir, I don't have any speaking partner. That's why I'm afraid to do speaking test. You don't need a speaking partner. To be honest, I think it's better to practice alone. The problem with a speaking partner is if they're weaker than you, they waste a lot of your time. If you're weaker than them, you're wasting a lot of their time. And even if you're perfectly at the same level, if you practice for an hour, you're speaking for 30 minutes and the other person is speaking for 30 minutes. But compare that to if you practice by yourself. So if you get a list of questions that you've never seen before, you look at the first one, you just start speaking, you practice out loud, and you do that for an hour. You've practiced for 1 hour in an hour. Whereas when you're working with a partner, you've practiced for half an hour every hour. So you're not really practicing as much. It feels more authentic to practice with a partner. It's certainly more enjoyable to practice with a partner. So there are a lot of things that are nicer about it. But, you know, in practical terms, and especially if you've got an IELTS test coming up soon, if you're trying to improve your fluency, you don't need a partner. You need to practice speaking, because improving your fluency is about, you know, using your brain, getting yourself to, you know, you read the question. Now suddenly you've got to think of the ideas. You got to think about like how to structure it. You've got to think about the words you want, and you've got to get that out. So the process that you go through in your mind is the exact same, whether someone is listening to you or not. So you see that question, you have to decide what to say and then say it. And by practicing that, you'll get better. Your fluency will improve. Yeah, so somebody listening makes it a nicer experience, but it doesn't necessarily benefit you anymore because you're still doing the same thing up here. So not having a partner isn't necessarily a bad thing at all. I don't think it's a reason to stop you from improving your fluency. But then be aware, like, you know, when you do the speaking test, you get a score for fluency, vocab, grammar, and pronunciation. So what you're talking about is practicing to speak. That will improve your fluency, but it's not going to benefit you in terms of vocab, grammar, and pronunciation. So yes, great, improve your fluency, but are you also working on the other 3 parts of your speaking? Or do you need to work on the other 3 parts of your speaking? A lot of students assume that practicing to speak will just magically make everything better. It won't. It will improve your fluency because you're getting better at thinking of the ideas, finding the words, getting it out. You know, you might need to do, it depends on your level. At lower level, you know, you might still be kind of translating from your own language into English, which doesn't happen. As you improve, you need to do that less. But you're not going to learn more words by practicing to speak. Your grammar won't get better unless you're, you know, actively studying grammar. And the same applies for pronunciation. So yeah, practicing to speak is great. It's a very effective way of improving fluency, but just be aware it won't fix every problem that you have. Ken Clark, with speaking, I find it impossible to not have constant exposure to authentic native content. For writing, you may smart your way out of it, but for something on the spot like speaking, you need reflex. Yeah, so I'm not sure what you mean by authentic native content. Like, when it comes to fluency, it's about the more you speak, better your fluency gets. Now, as well as that, like the more exposure you have to the English language in general, that will also improve your fluency. So if you move to an English-speaking country, everyone around you is speaking English all the time. All the TV, all the radio, all the music, everything is English, English, English. Then you go home, you start reading books in English, you know, and your housemates are English, you're speaking English to them. Of course, all the extra listening that you're doing in English will help your brain to start working in English more easily. So that will help as well, but nothing is going to be more effective than, you know, physically speaking in English as much as possible. I'm not sure what you mean by authentic native content. I'm not sure what you're talking about there, but it sounds like you're talking about listening, which would help, but not as much as speaking. Hi, Lewis. So you just got your results. Overall 7, speaking 8, listening 8, reading 6, writing 6. So some good scores there. It depends on what your university wants. Like what's considered a good score depends on what you want. You know, if your university wants a higher score, well then that score isn't good enough. If your university needs the score that you've got, well that's perfect. but it depends on the university. So each university makes their own decision as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So, different students have different target scores. If you hit your target, that's a good score. If you didn't, it's not a good score. And, someone might get a higher score than you, but they needed an even higher score. That wouldn't be good. So it's not that my score is higher than your score makes it good. It's, did you get the score your university needs? That's what makes it good. So you have to contact the university, find out what score they require. I cannot tell you if it's good or bad until I know what your target score is. So that's very important. And, before anybody joins my courses, before they pay to join the course, I'll always ask that question. It's like, what is your target score? If they don't know what their target score is, I'll get them to go, contact the university or contact the immigration office or wherever, it could be a job that they're applying to, and find out what score they need first. It's very important to know that, because if you don't know what your goal is, like how do you know what to aim for? How do you know if you're after getting there or not? So you need to contact the university. Mohammed, can you tell me about the idioms and fancy vocabulary used in the speaking section? How many should I use? No, it doesn't work like that, Mohammed. You use whatever vocab you can use. Whatever vocab comes to you naturally, that's going to get you the best score you can get. You shouldn't be learning special words for the IELTS test. You shouldn't be trying to use idioms. You shouldn't be trying to learn fancy vocabulary. If your vocab isn't good enough, like let's say, for example, you need a band 7 and your vocab is currently a band 6. Okay, so you need to improve your vocab from a band 6 to a band 7. You should not do that by trying to learn idioms and fancy vocab. You should do that by trying to learn normal vocab, normal words that people use all the time. That's how you improve your vocab. So in the IELTS test, it's just testing your English in general, like your ability to communicate in English and your ability to have the vocab you need to, communicate with precision. So learning unusual words that are rarely used in English, that's not going to improve your score faster than learning normal words that everyone uses all the time, but you don't know yet. So the more common the word, the more useful it is. The words that are used all the time are the words that you should be using. If there are any common words that you don't know, those are the best words for you to learn. Not learning weird words that nobody ever uses, not learning unusual words that would only be used in very particular contexts and you'll probably never be able to use anyway, and will be incredibly unlikely to be relevant in your IELTS test. So think about it like you're building a wall. Just start at the bottom and build yourself up slowly but surely. You can't start up at the top of the wall. You have to start at the bottom and build up. So if you're building up your wall and you're here and now you're like, okay, I'm going to start building this row next. It's like, you can't. You be realistic. Where are you now? What are the normal everyday words that would help you most? And just focus on those words. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. It's incredibly difficult. It takes a lot of time. The better your English is, the slower the improvement seems. It's not that your improvement is slower. It's that it seems slower. If you start off with 0, I know 0 words in English, and you learn 100 words, that seems massive. But if you know 10,000 words in English and you learn 100, it seems insignificant in comparison to what you already know. So you can only learn so many words, like in a month. How many words can someone learn? It's like probably not that many. In reality, you can only learn so many. But the better your English gets, that the ratio of what you've learned to what you already know, it keeps on feeling like it's smaller and smaller. And that's why, as your English gets better, staying motivated gets more difficult, because it feels like you've plateaued. It feels like you're staying at the same level, even though you're still learning the same number of words all the time. So technically, the number of words is increasing at the same rate. But the feeling that you get, it feels like, at the start, it feels like, great, I'm improving. And then after a while, it feels like you're just sitting at the same place for a long time. And that's what makes vocab difficult, is you get that sensation that you're not improving. You are, but you get the sensation that you're not. And it gets difficult to stay motivated at that point, because it takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. It's incredibly boring. And then you start to feel like you're not improving as quickly as you want. So the big thing is learning normal words, learning common words, and acknowledging that it's going to take a long time so that you can stay motivated. You need to be realistic with your targets. Improving vocab takes longer than any other aspect of the test. So if we're talking about like speaking, you have fluency, vocab, grammar, pronunciation. Vocab takes longer to improve than any of the other band scores. If we're talking about writing, you have task achievement, coherence and cohesion, vocab, grammar. Again, vocab takes longer to improve than any of the other ones. That's just the nature of it. So yeah, don't think about idioms or fancy vocab. Try to just learn, normal everyday words. Lewis, would it impact my score if I ask for explanation of vocab in part 2? No, not even a small bit. It's absolutely no problem. So if you are currently sitting at a band 7 in your speaking test and you ask for help, you ask the examiner to repeat, or you ask the examiner to explain a phrase, you're still at a band 7. So it doesn't affect your score, not even a small bit. Hi, Tang. Welcome to the lesson. Oleg Beck, good to see you here. Versailles, can we slow down for pronunciation clarity and still get a good score for fluency and coherence? Speaking slowly will reduce your fluency and coherence score. So speaking slowly would bring you down to a band 5. But when you say slow down your pronunciation, well, it depends. Are you speaking very quickly now? If you're speaking very quickly, you can slow down and that's fine. But if slowing down brings you down to when you're speaking, you speak very slowly, or that will bring down your score. So it depends where you're starting from. But when you're trying to improve your pronunciation and when you're trying to improve your grammar, you have to slow down. But that's something that needs to happen before you go to the IELTS test. If you go to the IELTS test and you haven't improved your pronunciation, you haven't fixed your pronunciation mistakes by the time you get to your IELTS test, forget about it. Just focus on fluency. Focus on communicating your ideas. Like whatever pronunciation mistakes you're going to make, let yourself make them. It's too late to fix them. You need to fix them before the test, not go into the test and magically, okay, today I'm just not going to make those pronunciation mistakes that I always make. It doesn't work like that, So go into the test, improve yourself before the test. By the time you get into the test, you've improved as much as you can improve. At that stage, allow yourself to make whatever pronunciation mistakes you make. Allow yourself to make whatever grammar mistakes you make. Focus on communicating clearly, good fluency, developing your answers fully, and don't worry about those pronunciation and grammar mistakes because it's too late to worry about them. You should have worried about them earlier. If you haven't fixed them by that point, it's too late. So just forget about it while you're in the test. Okay, Raul, my score on list of headings is never perfect in reading. How can I improve that? I try a lot from books and online site, but always get 3 out of 6 correct. So there isn't really a solution to this because what they do is they intentionally write 2 headings that are very similar in meaning. So for example, it might be, you're talking about paragraph A, maybe it's number 1 and maybe it's number 3. I'm not sure because 1 and 3 seem like they have the same meaning. And I don't understand how they're different. They seem like they're the same. So the problem here is your language ability. They are different, but your language ability is stopping you from understanding the difference. So, long-term solution is improve your English to the point where you understand how the meaning is different in those 2 headings. But that could take you 6 months or 12 months. Like, we have to be realistic as well. When you're in the test, you can't walk away for 6 months and come back and finish the test later. When you're in the test, a better solution, it's not the solution you want, but the best thing you can do is acknowledge, okay, they look the same. The problem is my English ability isn't high enough to understand the difference. I have to guess and just guess quickly. Instead of spending 5 minutes trying to guess and then you're losing time that you would benefit from later. So instead of spending 5 minutes trying to guess, just say, look, I don't know the difference. There's nothing I can do here. Guess, move on. It's not going to improve the number of headings matching what are they called? Matching headings, questions that you're going to get correct. It's not going to improve the number you're getting correct, but what it will do is it'll help to improve your overall score, because you're going to use your time more effectively later on instead of wasting your time there. So I know it's not the answer you want, but that's the reality with those questions. They're intentionally written to be a bit confusing like that. Mohammed, what if I use complex and compound structures and their mixture properly in writing section 2 and ignore fancy vocabulary? Actually, I can't remember some topic-specific vocab. So I'm not sure what you're asking me here, but you're talking about using grammar. Like, you should use a range of grammar structures, so that sounds like a good thing to do. You ignore fancy vocab. You should ignore fancy vocab, because why do you think it's fancy? Like, you think it's fancy. Normally, if you can use a word perfectly, it doesn't seem impressive. Words seem impressive when, like, you hear a person using a word that you cannot use. That makes a word sound impressive. Like, wow, that was impressive. The way that person used that word, I don't even know what that word means. They're impressing me. But when you can use the word yourself, it doesn't sound impressive when you can use it correctly. So very likely what you're talking about is trying to use vocab that you can't really use properly. So yeah, ignore fancy vocab. Yes, I agree. You should ignore fancy vocab. So yeah, use a range of structures. Don't use fancy vocab. I agree with both of those, but there's a question mark and I don't understand what your question is. Then you say, actually, I can't remember any topic-specific fancy vocab. Well, again, you shouldn't be using fancy vocab. You should be using the vocab you can use. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be improving your vocab. If there's a topic that you cannot discuss, like anytime that the healthcare system it comes up, you're talking about healthcare, but you don't have the vocab you need to communicate the ideas that you have. If you notice there's a topic like that you cannot discuss because of a lack of vocab, well, go and study vocab. Go and study the vocab you need, but not fancy vocab, normal vocab. So you're not trying to learn words that are fancy, just normal vocab you need to discuss those topics that you find challenging at the moment. So yeah, you be aware of what topics you struggle with and learn vocab for those topics, but not fancy vocab, just normal vocab all the time. Little Wolf, YouTube has a word limit. It does. You can go onto my Facebook page as well. There's no word limit on the comments there, if that's easier for you. I can't post my reading short paragraph where I have a doubt. Oh, it's going to be tricky for me anyway, like a full paragraph. So more, if you could explain to me the problem you're having rather than asking me why a question is right or wrong. If you give me a paragraph and I have to read that and then tell you why the answer is right or wrong, that's going to take 5-10 minutes where everybody's looking at me reading. So it's probably not a question that I would answer anyway. Hello, sir. About the table graph, when we write overall, when only 1 year is given, we just have to write the highest and lowest for each category. Yeah. What to write in oval when multiple years are given? When there's more than 1 year, you discuss the increases and decreases. So they call them dynamic and static charts. So static means there's only one point in time. You should be discussing the highest and lowest. More than one point in time, you'll see the changes over time. So you're discussing the increases, the decreases, anything that finished at the same level, that type of thing. Hi, Beck. Look back. Sir, how can I improve my reading comprehension? I have no problem with vocab, but I have problem with understanding, especially I find few answers in passage 3. So you need to understand what's stopping you from. You're saying you don't understand it, but you know all the vocab. People say this to me a lot, and I think it's like a little trick that our brains play with us. So it's like, I understand every word, but I don't understand the sentence. There's something wrong there. It's like, if you understood every word, you would understand the sentence. Like, there's no other reason that would stop you. But there are words with multiple meanings. So you might know one meaning of a word. Go to the dictionary. If it doesn't make sense in the context of the sentence, like, yes, I know what that word means, but that word has about 8 different meanings in the dictionary. So like, yeah, you know one of them, but it's not talking about that one, it's talking about a different one. So it could be that type of thing where you look at the word, you say you know it, but it's not the meaning of the word. The meaning of the word that you know isn't the meaning of the word that's being used in the text. That can often be the issue. So if you're reading the sentence and you don't understand it, well, then see which word doesn't make sense in that context and see if you can find the other meaning that word has. And if that other meaning, makes sense in the context of the sentence you're reading, it's probably something like that. And if it's not, it could be something else. I can't confidently say I'm correct, but at the moment, all you're saying is I'm having a problem understanding it. Now, you can't fix that because it's too vague. You need to find out more specifically what is causing that problem. What's the cause of that problem? The more specific you can be with the analysis will lead you to the obvious solution. I would guess it's what I said, but I can't be 100% sure about that. Ken Clark, what I mean is you need lots of input for speaking. Of course, lots of practice helps, but if you want to be fluent, aka be spontaneous, responsive, you need to hear natives' use of English in daily life. I'm not sure I agree with that. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Like I have a lot of students who've gone to international schools and they're just speaking English together, where all their first languages are not English. So you'd have like a mixture of kids from different backgrounds and they speak different languages at home, but when they go to school together, they're all speaking English and their fluency is always great. They might not always have great accuracy with vocab and grammar, but their fluency is always fantastic because they're interacting in English all the time. I'm not sure I agree with that. And that doesn't mean you're wrong. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong. But I just from my understanding, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think you can become very, very fluent without ever speaking to a native English speaker. That's, I've seen that. I believe that to be true. Lewis, in the speaking section, how do I know when to stop and avoid going off topic? It's not really that big a problem in the speaking section. Like, you can go into more detail about whatever it is that comes to mind. So, like in the writing test, you have to be laser focused and very, very logically develop your answer. So if you start with the idea, the explanation has to be, you need progression where you're not just repeating yourself and you're moving forward, and it has to be about the topic of the question, and it has to be about the topic of the main idea you've decided to discuss. But when it comes to speaking, if it's like, what did you like about your hometown? You might say like, well, to be honest, my favorite thing about my hometown was my friends there. I'm actually still in touch with a lot of my friends that I grew up with. We don't see each other that much anymore, but we're still close, even though we don't see each other that much. When we go home for Christmas, we usually see each other then. So yeah, we still see each other from time to time, but that's definitely my favorite thing about my hometown, was just the friends that I had there when I was growing up. So like talking about meeting my friends at Christmas, that's not really about my hometown, but it's not off topic either. So you can kind of bring the conversation where you want and let it lead kind of naturally from point to point, in a way that you can't do in the writing test. The writing test is much more rigid and formulaic because it's academic writing, whereas in speaking, it's informal. It's more like a chit chat. Like, what would you say if you're hanging out with your friends or, hanging out with your family members? So it's more like that. Little Wolf, it is boring. Just thought of learning French, but could do it only for a week. It's extremely boring to learn new language. Yeah, it's easier. Like if you start when you're young, it's easier as well. Like the older you get, the more difficult it is to retain that information. Like you see kids, they see a word once and they can use it correctly like about a month later. It's insane how kids are able to learn a language compared to like the active hard work and intentional effort that it requires as an adult. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's not impossible, but it definitely becomes it becomes more difficult as you get older. It's a fact. I've taken 2 mock tests and the feedback in speaking was to improve vocab range and fluency. Please give me some advice. Yeah, so to improve vocab, do you know what the easiest thing I can do, because there's quite a lot in it. Give me a second and I'll find a page on my website where I explain that. Okay, so I'll just leave a comment there. How to improve vocabulary, and I'll just leave a link to my website. You'll see it there in the comments. Let's just click on that link. Like, the basics is find the words you want to learn. Don't learn every word. You should just try to learn words that will be useful. Don't learn very rare words. Don't learn unusual words. Don't learn words that are too difficult for your level. Just trying your best to learn like common everyday words that are kind of about right for your level, not too high. And then learning them in enough detail that you can use them correctly. Because what a lot of students will do is they'll learn a word and then they'll learn the translation. And that's great for reading and listening, but that doesn't help when it comes to using that vocab in speaking or using that vocab in writing. You need to learn the collocations, the prepositions. You need to learn the exact meaning. Translations don't work as well as you improve, as your level of English gets higher. Translations don't work as well because they don't always have the same meaning. And in one language, they might have a negative connotation, where in the other language they don't. So, you can't really rely on your own language and translations as much, but you need to learn all of that as well as the collocations. What preposition is it used with? What verb is used with what noun? Like learning all of that information in detail. That's really important, and it's something that a lot of students don't do because they don't realize they need to, I suppose. Little Wolf, hi sir, please also read comments from YouTube. Yeah, I'm going through everything, Little Wolf. I'm going down one at a time down through all the comments. Lewis, Mr. Lar, how would you advise me to work faster in task 1, please? I guess I took too long for the task 1 and it affected task 2 as well. It depends where you're going slowly. It depends where you're losing time. But what I see a lot of students doing is trying to write, as they write the essay, they try to have every sentence perfect. So they'll write the first sentence and then they'll go back and change this little bit and change that bit and see, can they, move this over here, make the grammar a bit more complex, make the language more varied. And they'll spend a very long time on that one sentence. And then when they're completely happy, they'll write sentence 2 and do the same thing again. But with that approach, you're going to run out of time quickly because you're trying to make everything perfect. And you can't aim for perfection when you're in a timed exam. Of course, if you had more time, your essay would be better. That's normal. Like, that applies to everybody. So you have to be realistic and at least get the essay finished first. And then when you're finished, you know how much time you can spend trying to make it perfect. So you finish it in 15 minutes. You're like, great, I have 5 minutes to now try and perfect everything. You finish it in 18 minutes. Okay, now I have 2 minutes to try and make it perfect. But trying to make it perfect as you write each sentence, it just takes too much time. That might not be the problem that you're experiencing. That might not be where you're losing time. But it is a mistake that students make quite a bit. That's one thing to be aware of. And if it's not that, I guess, where are you losing time? Are you spending too much time analyzing it? Are you spending it too much time trying to have a wide variety of vocab? So you're trying to look back and go, did I use the word increase yet? Oh yeah, I used it once there. What word should I use now instead? like, losing time instead of just getting it done and then vary the language later. Maybe that type of mistake. It depends. But you need to figure out for yourself where is it going wrong for you? What are you doing wrong? Where are you losing time? Where are you doing things you don't need to do? Or how could you, kind of reorganize your approach so that you get the essay finished faster and then have more time to check later. What are the best methods to improve pronunciation? It depends. The first thing you need to do is find out what your pronunciation mistakes are. Is it a mistake with an individual sound? Like a lot of students, they pronounce a V when they need to pronounce a W and a V, that mix them up. They do them the wrong way around. So if it's that type of mistake, well, the problem is your muscle memory is incorrect, and you need to retrain your muscle memory by going really slowly and making sure you're doing it correctly over and over again for a long period of time. And by doing it that way for a long time, you'll naturally get better at it. And eventually it becomes muscle memory doing it correctly. But that doesn't work then when it comes to something like, some part of connected speech, or, if it's your sentence stress patterns or your intonation. That's more where you would rely on, mimicking and trying to replicate what you hear native English speakers doing, and just getting more familiar with the natural flow and the natural stresses in the language. So it depends what type of mistake you're trying to fix. But finding out if you don't know what mistakes you're making, finding out what type of mistake you're making first would be very important. You can't improve your pronunciation if you don't know what you're doing wrong. So that would definitely be the first place. That would be where to begin. Prince Naheen, sir, what's the connection between fluency and coherence? Well, the connection is they're the same band score. They're the same band score. So if your fluency goes down, your fluency and coherence goes down. If your coherence goes down, your fluency and coherence score goes down. So, both of those things are in the same band. So that's the connection. You become incoherent, it's going down. You become, too slow, it's going down. So either of those problems will pull that score down. So they're in the same band. That's basically the connection. Some passages are really tough, sir. You have to acknowledge that. Oh yeah, absolutely. I would never say that IELTS is easy. Like I would never come in to an IELTS student and say, it's really easy to get a high score. That's not true. Like the students that I work with work incredibly hard for a long time, and they get the scores they need because they work very hard for a long time. Nobody's getting their scores because it's easy. Nobody's lucky. Nobody's getting a high score because they're lucky. People are getting high scores because they've worked very hard. Now, for some people, that work was when they were younger. So somebody's got a band 7 vocab because they studied English a lot when they were younger. And some people, they're currently at a band 6 and they need to study a lot so that they can get a band 7. But, are you doing the work now, or was the work already done in the past? That's the only difference. It's not easy. None of it's easy. I 100% acknowledge that. Mohammed, do you have any plans to make new videos on reading? I think you made enough videos for speaking and writing to get a high score. I have a big, long list of videos that I want to make. I've just been so busy that I haven't got back to it. I have a list here, like probably about, like every time I have an idea or every time someone suggests something, I add it to a list that I have. But it's just the time for me. Like, to make a video takes about 4 or 5 hours. Like for a short little 20-30 minute video, it takes about 4 or 5 hours. I generally just don't have that much time anymore. I'd love to make more. I was even thinking about it at the start of today. I thought I had a bit more free time today. It disappeared. Other stuff came up, and the time evaporated. It doesn't look like I'm going to have any more free time until next week. But that was something I was thinking about this morning. Some other stuff came up, other stuff came up in my life. So yeah, I would love to, but the time is the problem. How much time does it take to get from intermediate to advanced? A lot. It takes a lot of time. Like, let's say like each step is going to be a year. So you're probably talking 2 years, maybe more. And that's if you're working hard. Like, that's 2 years if you're going actively studying every day. It's not 2 years. It's like, okay, I'll wait 2 years and I'll be advanced. Like, it's not. And thinking about it in terms of time can be deceiving as well. Like, a lot of students will say, how long will it take me to get a band 7? And I say, like, a year. But if you work, 1,000 years if you don't. So sometimes I think it's better to think about, rather than thinking about it in terms of how much time from now until I get there, think about it in terms of how many hours of study do I need to do. So, if we're saying 2 hours a day for 2 years, I'm going to pull out the calculator for this one now, not to get it wrong. But if we're saying 2 hours a day for 2 years, think about it as about 1,500 hours of study. So how long will it take you to do 1,500 hours of study? Think about it that way, So it's not like it'll take me 2 years to get it. It'll take me 1,500 hours of study to do it. So how many hours are you going to study every day? How many days are you going to take off? How many days are you going to say, I'm too tired, I'm not in the mood today? Like, all of that counts. So it's not really how many years between here and there. It's how many hours of study between here and there. And if you can think of it that way, that's more realistic, as in, like, how many hours have I done? How many more hours do I need to do? As opposed to how many months have passed. So it's about how much work you do, not about how much time has passed. So, you need to think of it that way. I think it's easier to think of it that way. Raul, can you say something on tables and pie charts? Need some vocab for those. Yeah, again, on my website, I've gone through all the typical vocab that you would use and the typical grammar structures that would use. So if you go to my website, go to the task 1, academic task 1 section, and go to vocab, academic task 1, vocabulary and grammar, and coherence and cohesion. Actually, go through those and you'll see all the types of language you can use for graphs. Hi, Mohammed. Little Wolf, sometimes I mix pronunciation of words even though I know it's pronunciation. Like, at this moment, I'm mixing the pronunciation of plane and with plan. What is the underlying issue here? Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't understand why that would happen, to be honest. Are you trying to speak too quickly? I'm only guessing. I genuinely wouldn't know. I wouldn't know why that would happen. But if you know it's happening, it's easier to fix, And I would say, if you notice yourself making a mistake, always go back and correct it, because then you're reinforcing the correct pronunciation. Instead of saying it incorrectly and going like, damn, I'll try to get it right next time. It's like, you notice it's wrong, go back, fix it right now, and then continue, because that's going to make it, that's going to reinforce the correct pronunciation, and you're more likely to get it right next time if you force yourself to go back and repeat the correct pronunciation this time. Is it better to speak in a way which native speakers use, or we should be formal in the test? Whatever you would be most comfortable doing, whatever way you would naturally speak is the way you should speak in the test. So it shouldn't be a performance. When you're in the test, you're not performing, you're just showing how you speak. So if you would normally speak in a formal way, do that. If you normally speak in an informal way, do that. Don't adapt your natural style, your natural way of speaking for the test. Whatever way you would normally speak, that's what you should do. It's not that one is right and one is wrong, but you're trying to make life as easy as possible for yourself. You're trying to make life as easy as possible for yourself while you're in the test. And it's already difficult enough, and it's stressful to be in the test. So focusing more on understanding the questions, trying to communicate your answer as clearly as possible, and not trying to perform and speak in a way you wouldn't normally speak. What's up, sir? Not a whole load now, to be honest. Okay, we only have 10 minutes left, and I still have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to try and push through them a little bit faster. I'm going to give shorter answers for the rest of the lesson. So if 4 or 5 variables are given, can I write all the variables? Wouldn't it be too long overall? I'm not sure what you're talking about. It depends on the question type. But if you're talking about task 1, you need to discuss all the categories. That has to happen. One tip for people having problems with reading comprehension: check your grammar and match the words, chunks of words in the sentence to a grammar structure. It should be clearer then. So that would be with sentence completion and stuff like that. And yeah, gap fills and stuff like that. Yeah. Multiple meanings, like one word betrays one meaning is to cheat. Its other meaning is to reveal something. So to excel at reading, we need to know all the meanings one word can have. Yeah, but I mean, it just depends on your language ability as well. Like I said, don't if you learn a word, if you see a word, learn the context, learn the meaning of the word that you found that you want to learn. Like if a word has 8 different meanings, you don't need to learn all 8 now. Just learn the one that's relevant, to whatever you've been reading at the moment. Mimo, in academic IELTS speaking, should I be formal or informal? I got contradicting answers from the instructors. So we were just talking about that a moment ago there with Koramboy. So whatever is most natural for you, that's what you need to do. The examiner doesn't need you to speak in a formal style. The examiner doesn't need you to speak in an informal style. You just need to speak. So in the writing test, it must be formal. But in the speaking test, it doesn't have to be. In speaking part 2, if the topic is about a book you recently read, but we have no ideas, can we speak about a book which a film is produced from, such as Harry Potter? But if you didn't read the book, no, you have to talk about a book. So you can't say, well, I saw a movie that's based on a book. That's not okay. You have to talk about a book. If you asked about a book, you have to talk about a book. I think the reason why I said that is because I met lots of people whose problem isn't just the English language, but the communication skills themselves, exposure to real-life context, deal with both. Okay. Little Wolf, if a bar graph is static, but 5 or 6 variables are given, how to choose variables for the overall? We can't write all the variables in the overall. So you say which categories, which are the highest values for each category. And if the overview isn't too long, you talk about the lowest as well. Versailles, what could be an effective way to fix my pronunciation mistakes for individual sounds? So just choose one pronunciation mistake at a time. Don't try to fix them all together. Choose one, focus on fixing that, and allow yourself to speak really, really, really slowly so that you can do it correctly. If you try to maintain a normal speed, you're going to miss all those opportunities to say it correctly. You have to speak slowly in the beginning. Lewis, trying to identify all main features and thinking too much about the language. With the language, I tend to repeat vocab and sentence structure. So that's okay until you get it finished. Just get it finished first. Sir, can we use idioms in task 2? No, we don't use idioms in task 2. They're informal. They're generally informal. Lewis, you're very welcome. This student, sir, what do you think? Is it possible to get from beginner to IELTS score 6 in 8 months? No, it's not. Definitely not. Like beginner, like learning hello, how are you today and getting a band 6 in 8 months? No, not possible. Fluency and coherence are 2 different things. We can be fluent even when we're incoherent. Like Q is about climate. I talk history with good fluency, but the answer is incoherent. Yep. Little Wolf, what a year. I practice speaking every day, yet I'm stuck at the same level for 4 years. But you're practicing fluency. Is fluency your problem? Like, are you improving your fluency, but you're not improving your pronunciation? Maybe your pronunciation is the score that's keeping everything else down. Like if your pronunciation is so poor that the examiner doesn't understand what you're saying, well, even though your fluency is improving, even if your fluency is improving, the examiner can't give you a higher score. The examiner isn't going to guess, like, I've no idea what they're saying, but it's probably okay. They can't do that. So they're just going to have to assume that everything is wrong. So, maybe you're focusing on the wrong area. It could be that. Mohammed, hello, Rahul. Hi, Rahul. I didn't find any link to vocab used for pie chart. Just found more on line graph. So we wouldn't use different language for different types of graphs. So there'd be types of language you would use for dynamic charts and types of language you would use for static charts. So if you have a pie chart that's 2 points in time, that would be the same language as a line graph. If you have a pie chart that's just based on 1 point in time, well, then you'll be talking about highest and lowest. So it could be the same as a bar chart or a table or whatever. So that you don't need special language for pie charts. You need some language for static and some language for dynamic. This session is very informative and insightful as always. Thank you, XIX. As I consider myself one of your students, my training abroad is starting in DEC. Fantastic. Well done. Piopat is already in Australia. How wonderful. Well done. And thank you for informing me. That's great. Great news, XIX. Okay, so we looked at that already. Lewis, you're very welcome. Versailles, thank you. You learned a lot. Great. And we actually got to the final comment. So all wrapped up. Okay, so that's it for today, guys. I'll have another live stream next week. So talk to you all then. If you need me, that's my email address. So reach out there. And yeah, thank you very much. Take care of yourselves and bye for now.